Hello all, welcome to Lawyers Club India. I'm Raghav, editor at Lawyers Club India, and today I'll be trying to explain section 17 to 21 of the Indian Evidence Act, which deals with admissions. Now, this is a set of few sections which are basics of Indian Evidence Act, but when it comes to their interpretation, there's a wide interpretation that can be made, and that is where the issue lies, and that is why the topic was demanded, and so here we are. Now, I have compiled few questions on the basis of which I'll be trying to explain admissions from section 17 to 21, and with the help of some judgments that I have found to be relevant in few books that I have referred to, especially Batuklal. So let's start. First, what is an admission? An admission is a voluntary acknowledgement of any fact. The definition of admission is given in section 17, which says it is a statement which can be documentary, which can be oral, or which can be in electronic form. This statement suggests an inference to any fact in issue or relevant fact, and these can be made by any persons or under the circumstances that have been given in the sections that are to come after section 17. Now, this section 17, 18, 19, 20 and 21, when they are read together, then we can understand what are admissions, and after that starts confessions. There's a difference between both of them which can be which we can learn afterwards. So first, starting with admission and elaborating on it a little. So admission is a statement, oral or documentary or contained in electronic form. Admission, I've already told, it's a voluntary acknowledgement of any fact. Now, why is it important? Because once you admit something, you must have heard that I admit to this mistake, or I admit that this is the right thing, this is the event that happened. And you might have also heard that when there's a plaint in the WS, you have to say, you have to either admit or you have to deny the facts. So when you admit any fact, the other party does not have to prove it. So here lies the importance of the admission. And so what is the importance? That if you admit to something, the other party does not have to prove it, and it is proved in the court, and so the burden of the court is reduced. Now, admission is a statement, oral or documentary or contained in electronic form. Now, this statement may be in any form of communication. The form of communication is immaterial, and it can be done in any form. The ruling is Bhogilal Chunnilal Pandya versus State of Bombay, AIR 1959, Supreme Court, page number 356. This is also in CRLJ 389 and SCJ 240. What the court has said is that the word statement means only something that is stated, and the element of communication to another person is not necessary. The communication by which it is made is not necessary, although it may have some effect on the weightage that we can draw from such statement or admission that is made. So if some statement is orally made to some person who's not as connected with the suit, it will have less weightage. But if there's something that is stated in documentary form and is directly related to the fact and issue, or relevant fact, or anything, any party that is related to the suit, it will have more weightage than the other one. But the communication does not matter when we have to define something as an admission. A statement which suggests an inference to any fact and issue or relevant fact itself becomes an admission. Weightage is a different thing. Now, which suggests an inference as to any fact and issue or relevant fact. Suggests any inference in the diglot. In when we see what it is in Hindi, it says कोई अनुमान इंगित होता है, that we get an idea of something, of some fact, something that is going to happen, of some event, how it happened, when it happened, we get an idea of it. So if I just move out of here, if I just walk out of here, you will be suggested an inference that I am stopping my lecture here, or I'm absconding or just going away, and this is going to stop. So an admission is any statement that suggests any inference. आपको कोई आइडिया लगता है किसी चीज के बारे में, और वो किसी चीज क्या है, वो है, those are facts in issue and relevant facts. Now what are facts in issue and relevant facts? Facts in issue, we will have to go back to the definitions to see what is a fact in issue. Now fact in issue, the expression means and includes any fact from which, either by itself or in connection with the other facts, there is a creation. Any fact from which, either by itself or in connection with the other facts, the existence, non-existence, nature or extent of any right, liability or disability which is asserted or denied in any suit or proceeding necessarily follows. Now this means that when there is a fact which is in issue, now there are various facts out of which a case is made. Facts are everything, anything, relation of things, state of things which are perceivable by senses. Now there's a case that is made out of these facts. Someone killed someone and something happened around it, and there are these facts, and out of these facts some facts may be relevant and disputed. Now these facts which are disputed are the issues which the court has to apply judicial mind to and solve for us, the parties in the court. When they solve these issues, these facts and issues, then they can pronounce a judgment as to who will win. Now what will we win or what will we lose? We will win a right, as it is said in the facts and issue. Existence, non-existence, nature or extent of any right, and the person who loses will be entitled to a liability or disability, and these are asserted or denied in a suit, and they follow when there is a fact and issue. Now this fact and issue gets resolved by the court, and maybe the person who was killed, the person who came into the court on his behalf to fight the case, he will win. He will get a right. In a civil suit, you may get a right to a property, and there's a liability that the other person who is convicted will have to face. He may be imprisoned. He may have to pay the compensation. So these are facts and issues. Now when we talk about relevant facts, facts we have already read. Facts are anything, state of things, relation of things which can be perceived by the senses, and they also include mental condition that a person is conscious of. It is important to be conscious of that mental condition, because if you're not conscious of something, you're not perceiving it by your senses. So it is not a fact. It is nothing that you can perceive. So these are facts, and after that is the definition of relevant. One fact is said to be relevant to another if one is so connected with the other in any of the ways referred to in the provisions of this act. Which provisions? The provisions that start from section 6. Now there are sections like 7 where you will find occasion, cause and effect. You will find subsequent and previous conduct in section 8. You will find things said or done in section 10. You will find facts that are necessary to introduce other facts in section 9. In 11 you will find the facts that are otherwise irrelevant, which tells you about the alibi, or there may be facts which tend to enlighten you on the question whether some act was accidental or intentional. These all are relevant facts. So when we are talking about a conspiracy, and there are things that the conspirators have done in furtherance of a common design, the offense that they were going to commit, we find that anything that they said or they did was relevant. Relevant for what? Relevant for proving a case, proving the facts and issue which are disputed, which are not proved, which we do not know as of now that this happened or not. So there are convicts who are saying that no, we did not conspire, we did not commit this offense, but there are facts. We find that there was a WhatsApp chat where some person was saying something or some person was saying another thing, and something that they did. These become relevant facts. These are relevant to the case at hand to prove it. And once they are proved, the liability, the right, or the disability, uh, they will be ascertained by the court who is applying the judicial mind. So moving on, after facts and issue and relevant facts, and which is made by any of the persons. As to any admissions, admission is a statement, oral, documentary, or contained in electronic form, which suggests any inference as to any fact in issue or relevant fact, and which is made by any of the persons. Now, where are these any of the persons? They come in the sections to follow. जैसे कि 18, 19, 20. So these are the sections which are now these 19 and 20 are also the exceptions of 17 and 18 in a way. So 17 mein they tell us what is an admission, and in 18, 19 and 20 they tell us about who are the persons who can make admissions. ऐसे कौन से लोग हैं जो स्टेटमेंट्स जो दे देंगे उनको एडमिट किया जा सकता है. तो वो कौन कौन से लोग हैं? यू विल फाइंड देम इन 18 which are agents, the party to the suit, obviously their agents. Then in 19 we find, in 18 itself we find the suitors and representative character, the trustees, the next friends, etc. And there are persons from whom the interest is derived, the person who are interested in subject matter, and the persons whose position must be proved as against the party to the suits. In section 20, admissions by persons expressly referred to by the party to the suits. So here, which is made by any persons, the any persons here refers to persons who have been referred to in section 18, 19 and 20. And under the circumstances hereinafter mentioned. Now, what will be the circumstances under which admissions will be admissible or not? You will see all the sections that follow in Indian Evidence Act, which will tell you where can an admission be, where can a statement be admission, where can it be admitted, or where it cannot be admitted. Now, we have read the section and we have understood what is the meaning, but there are certain interpretations that should be made and some questions that arise when we talk about these sections. So what are those questions? They are solved by many judgments that have come by different courts. So firstly, in Chikkam Koteshwar Rao versus Subba Rao 1981, the court said that we have to read all the statements together, and there were guidelines that were given by Supreme Court. Now, if the statement I am an accused and I gave a statement as to I did this act and I murdered someone, but that was done in a fit of anger, there was provocation, etc. So we have to read it all together. We cannot read it in parts. We cannot just read that I killed this person and ignore the part where he says that I did this because there was provocation. So this is what Chikkam Koteshwar Rao versus Subba Rao says, that we have to read all the statements together. These were the guidelines by Supreme Court. Now, in the case law that is given just under the section in notes, statement before doctor is admission and is admissible in evidence. Ammini versus State of Kerala 1998. In this case, the person who made the admission was accused of murder, and he told the doctor how he got injured. Now the question arises, to whom the admission is being made. Is that important? It is not important. It is only important who's making the admission, because he has to be someone who has to fall in the category that is given by section 18, 19, 20. But to whom he is making is not relevant, and if you can prove that he made so and so admission which is relevant, which infers a suggestion, which suggests an inference to any relevant fact or fact in issue, then it can be admitted in the court of law, and it can be used for the respective side. So this person admitted to the doctor that about his injury and about the murder, and this statement that was given to the doctor was admissible. Now, connected to the Chikkam Koteshwar Rao C. Subbarao 1981, the Supreme Court has also mentioned in Parmeshwari Bai versus M. Sindhia that admissions should be clear and specific. If those are not clear and specific, you don't have to necessarily draw an inference from it. You can only draw an inference from an admission which is clear and specific. Ambiguous admissions should not be admitted and should not be proved and um, uh, should not be taken as evidence in court. Now, very importantly, a question arises whether admission of law is admissible. No, in India, admission of law is not admissible. Admission of a fact, that is admissible, but in England, admission of law is also admissible. So if you make a statement as to any fact, that is admissible, but if you make a statement as to any law, it is not necessarily admissible. This was given in the case of Jagwant Singh versus Sitan Singh, ILR 21 285. There's also another judgment, Bharat Singh versus Bhagirath, AIR 1966 Supreme Court 405, where the court has said that admission is a substantive evidence of the fact admitted, and what weight is to be attached to such admission is a matter different from its use as relevant evidence. This we have already discussed, that admission is a relevant is a substantive evidence. Now what will be the weightage, वो कितना काम आ सकता है, कितना उसकी evidentiary value है, that is totally a different case. Now these admissions can be judicial or extrajudicial. As the name suggests, judicial are those which are connected with the suit and are made in relevance to the suit in hand, the case in hand, and those which are made in the court. These are the judicial admissions, and there are then extrajudicial admissions which are made outside of the court. These have not been defined in the act as such, but these are some categorizations that have been done in law. Now, where can we find admissions in the procedural law? Now, when we talk about Evidence Act, it is a mixture of substantive and procedural law. So we have to look into the procedural laws, the mainstream procedural laws, CPC and CRPC, what provisions are there which talk about admission. So in CPC, you may find some provisions for admission such as Order 10, Rule 1, Order 11, Rule 8, Order 12, Rule 4, and Order 14, Rule 3. And in CRPC, you will find it in 251(5), Clause 5 and 255, Clause 2, and Section 243 also, and also Section 263. Now, we talked about extrajudicial admission. This may be direct and indirect as well. There is again a category. First we had admission, which was judicial and extrajudicial. Now we have the extrajudicial admission, which can be divided into two classes, direct and indirect. Now direct and indirect is on the basis of clarity of the admission made, of the statement made, and the weightage that will be given to it subsequently. So if there's a extrajudicial admission that was made, but the wordings of it is not very clear, so there will be a different less weightage attached to it, and if the wordings are clear, then there will be more weightage attached to it. These are direct and indirect, and they have not been talked about in the act, but it is necessary to talk about them when we are learning about admissions. Now, we saw that admission being made to someone is not relevant. Who you are making an admission to is not relevant, but is the age of the person making the admission relevant? So the age of the admission of a person of any age may be used against him. The mere fact that the admission making the statement was a child will not make the admission irrelevant. So this was said in Raghavan versus Somini Anima, AIR 1957, Kerala 178. So the judgment says that even if it's a child, the statement made by such child can be considered as an admission and can be used against the person. Also here, if it is not already clear that admissions are the statements which are made, these are the admissions may be against a person also and for the person also by himself, but the one that is against him is the only one that is admissible in law, because the law does not trust anyone making an admission on his own behalf, unless there are some conditions in which are allowed in law, which you will find in section 21. But generally, admissions which are made against oneself, those are admissible, because a person will not, if he is ready to incriminate himself, ready to suffer uh, the punishment that may follow, that can be trusted. But it is natural that the person, if allowed to admit for himself, he will definitely do it. So that is that. And then we come to another question, whether the admissions made in a previous suit, the pleading, petition, affidavit, are they relevant, are they admissible in another suit that follows. So suppose I was involved in a case where I made some statement as to any fact which was related to that suit, and similar is needed or is relevant to another suit that follows afterwards or is subsequently happening. Is that statement admissible in that suit? So the judgment of Basant Singh versus Janki Singh, AIR 1967, Supreme Court 41, says that in suits, that is the civil cases, the admissions made in previous suit are relevant and they are admissible in next suit, in the suit that follows. Anytime it might not necessarily follow the suit, it might be happening subsequently. So they are admissible there. But in criminal proceedings, any statement made by me which was admissible in a criminal suit which happened 1 or 2 or 3 4 years back, it is not admissible in the criminal trial that is happening now. Now there's a very important point: can silence be an admission? If I speak, if I give a statement, oral, documentary, or in electronic form, that is an admission. But if I omit to say something that I should have said, can that be treated as an admission? Yes, that can be treated as an admission, and that is given in the judgment of C.T. Devaraja versus Will Amlen, VILAMAMLEN, AIR 1955, NUC 3949. So the judgment says a party by his silence may admit the truth of the matter stated. A party's silence will render the statements made in his presence or hearing evidence against him of their truth, provided that he is reasonably called to reply thereto. It is provided that he should be reasonably called to reply thereto. He should be given that opportunity, because that is in the natural justice. But omission may also be counted as an admission. If you don't say, you admit to it. If you don't deny a statement, you admit that statement. Now when we talk about the persons who make statements, question arises whether statements by agent, are they binding upon the person, uh, that this person is agent for, and also the admissions made by the pleader, attorney, counsel, and by the partners that you have in your company, by the guardian, are these admissions binding? So when we talk about agents, yes, they are binding, but one, the statement that has been made or thing that has been done should be done or made in the lawful transaction of a business. And the next thing, that it should be made only when his agency continues, in the continuance of his agency, not after that or before that. Those will not be relevant in your case. But if he does it in the lawful transaction, he does not go out of the ambit of the job that he's doing, of the agent, that of the job that he's agent for. If he goes out of it, then it becomes unlawful. If he's doing in the lawful transaction and in the continuance of the agency, then his statements may be binding on the person that he's agent for. This is in Kedarnath Bejoria versus State of West Bengal, AIR 1954, SC 660. Then we have admissions made by pleaders, attorney, counsel in civil cases. If a client appoints a pleader, attorney or counsel and gives him full authority to conduct his case and give him full information about the facts, then the admission made by such counsel under his signature without some serious mistake is conclusively binding upon the client. So it is important to note that when the client has appointed that person, first that person should be appointed. ऐसे नहीं कि कोई भी आके मैं pleader और मैं ऐसा बोलूँगा, so that won't happen. And he gives him full authority. He says that you are my pleader and now you can you can fight on my behalf and you can carry this on, and give him all the information and facts. So if the pleader does not know all the information about the case, or he does not have any facts, then his statements might land the client in some serious issue. So those will not be admitted. And then the admissions which are made should not have any serious mistake. If there is a serious mistake that is done which is not natural, when you know that this is a serious mistake that is committed and that may be hampering the interest of the client, then it will again not be admitted. Otherwise, it can be admitted, and if all these things are confirmed that everything is in the right place, then these statements cannot be withdrawn. Although in Abdul Hamid Khan versus Commissioner of Income Tax, AIR 1967, Andhra Pradesh 211, it was said by the court, by the Supreme Court, that by the court of Andhra Pradesh, that admission by a counsel may be withdrawn before the other party acts upon it. So this principle will also apply in cases where there is time for the party to act upon it. They have not acted upon it, so the counsel may withdraw it. But if he makes a statement and the other party acts upon it, then you cannot withdraw it. It will be an admission on your behalf. Then we have admission by partners, in the case of Sohan Lal versus Gulam Chand, AIR 1966, Rajasthan 229, the court has said that when an admission is made by one partner in representative capacity, it would be an evidence against the firm under section 18 of the Evidence Act and against the other partners also. So when it comes to partners, unlike agents and unlike pleaders, there is much more responsibility that is attached, and there is much more finality that is attached to the admissions that are made by the partners. So now when we come to guardian ad litem, now if you are a minor and you have been appointed you have a guardian that has been appointed to guard your interest in the court of law, and he makes an admission, then that can also be admitted, but it should be shown that his admission was made in good faith, because there might be a case where your guardian is not acting in your welfare and he has colluded with the other side and is making an admission that might help them. So in that case, the court will see, it will be the responsibility of the court to see whether that person is acting in the welfare of the child or not, and the court will have to be proactive in its approach, that anything that is happening, any admission is being made, any evidence is being made, or any activity that is being done by the guardian is being done in the welfare of the child. And if the court feels that such guardian next friend is not acting in the welfare interest of that child, the court can change that person and appoint another guardian. Now there's another example that has been given, which is the responsibility of the ministers when they make any statement on behalf of the government. In these cases also, there's a lot of responsibility involved, because any admission that he is making might affect the public at large. So the responsibility is well settled and lot more than the other cases. And so if there's a statement that is made by Home Minister in the Legislative Assembly in his capacity and in discharge of his duty, it is important that he is discharging his duties while he makes that statement, not casually while he is not discharging his duties, he is not in that office. So as ministers, these are admissible and will be treated as admissions made by the government. This was held in Sibnath Banerjee versus A.E. Potter, AIR 1943, Calcutta 337. And in section 18, I'll just read it to you. So, statements made by a party to the proceeding or by an agent to any such party. We have already talked about agents. So, uh, agents may be your advocate, that he's an agent who's acting on your behalf in the court, or maybe your agent who works in the course of the business as your agent who goes and represents you. That may be your agent to any such party whom such court regards under the circumstances of the case as expressly or impliedly authorized. Now these persons should be regarded by the court as someone who is expressly or impliedly authorized. Now expressly would be that there's some written document that says that such person is the agent of this company and will be acting on behalf. Maybe you are a company secretary and you are representing some company in a court case, then it comes under this category, expressly authorized. And impliedly authorized, maybe some person, maybe you have a general provision store, a shop, and you have an agent who delivers things, so he is an agent for you, he is acting on your behalf. If he does something wrong, or if he admits to something, he gives a statement, then it becomes a statement of your agent who was impliedly authorized on your behalf to do something. He was impliedly authorized by you to take and deliver stuff to people, and if he did something wrong or if he stated something wrong, then it may go against you. Impliedly authorized by him to make them are admissions. Now after that comes by suitor in representative capacity. Statements made by parties to suit, suing or sued in any representative character are not admissions unless they were made while the party making them held the character. We have already discussed that the statements that are made by those in the representative character should be made while such representative character continues. It should not be such that these statements are being made after this representative character ceased to be. So if this person who was delivering stuff for you, if this person made a statement as to anything relevant to this transaction before a court, before he was hired as an agent in your shop, maybe you knew him before any such transaction that you entered into, he made a statement then, it would not be admitted, it would not be admissible. And you have fired him, and after that he makes a statement or he does something, then his statement or his action would not be admissible. So it should be in the continuance. Now section 18 also states afterwards that parties interested in the subject matter who have any proprietary or pecuniary interest in the subject matter of the proceedings and who make the statements in their character of persons so interested. So if now the parties who have any proprietary interest in the proceeding that you are involved in, and if they have any subject matter, if they have any interest in the subject matter, so maybe there is a dispute of a land, and you are someone who's claiming the land, and there are people who are claiming the land, other people, and there may be someone who wants to buy that land, there may be other people who may lay claim to that land, and there are other people who are going to build something on that land. They are the people whom you are going to sell the property. They are also interested in the subject matter. They have also paid some money, earnest money. So these are the people who have some proprietary or pecuniary interest in the subject matter of the proceedings, and the statements made by these persons also will be relevant. Now this one is an exception the language says persons who have any proprietary or pecuniary interest in the subject matter of the proceedings and who make the statement in their character of the person so interested. Now, the language of the section says that these are not admissions. The statements made by parties to suit, suing or sued in representative characters are not admissions unless they were made while the party making them held that character. So these all are the exceptions. First, in section 18, the general provision is that the party to the suit and the agents who have been expressly or impliedly authorized, only these person are those जिनकी statements को admit किया जा सकता है. उसके बाद ये exceptions हैं जिसमें parties ये agent नहीं है मगर वो subject matter में क्योंकि उनकी रुचि है, क्योंकि उनकी पेक्यूनरी इंटरेस्ट है उस चीज़ में, उनका कोई ना कोई इंटरेस्ट है उस चीज़ में, तो देयर स्टेटमेंट्स विल बी एडमिसिबल. And the persons from whom the interest is derived, person from whom the parties to the suit have derived their interest in the subject matter of the suit, are admissions if they are made during the continuance of the interest of the persons making such statements. So people from whom you derive an interest from, so you derive, maybe you are going to derive an interest in a land, you are going to get the title of ownership of that land from a woman, from your mother, and you are in a proceeding and there's some dispute about that land, there's some question, some fact and issue that arises which is relevant to that land. So the person from whom you derive the interest, that person's statement are also admissible. So that is what the clause 2, the point 2 in section 18 says. Now comes section 19, which is very important. It says statements made by persons whose position or liability it is necessary to prove as against any party to the suit are admissions if such statements would be relevant as against such persons in relation to such position or liability in a suit brought by or against them, and if they are made whilst the person making them occupies such position is subject to such liability. Now to understand this one, we'll have to go through the illustration. The illustration says A undertakes to collect rents for B. B sues A for not collecting rent due from C to B. Now A is collecting rents from people for B, and now B sues A that this person whom I had kept and who had undertaken to collect rents for me from people has not collected the rent from C. There might be other facts also that he is in collusion or he's taking money or anything, but he is not collecting the rent from C. And now A denies that rent was due from C. Now A says that there was no rent that was due to C. A statement by C that he owed B rent is an admission. Statement by C, the person from whom the rent had to be collected, a statement by C that he owed B rent. Now he himself says that I owed some rent to B, I had to pay this money to B. It will be an admission and is a relevant fact as against A who was collecting the rent. It is a relevant fact against him. If A denies that C did owe rent to B, if A says that if he denies that C had to pay some money to B, so here A was saying that that C from whom the B wants A to collect rent, A says that he does not owe anything to B. But now C himself comes and says that yes, this is the money that I owe to B. So this will be relevant against A. Now if we read the section, it will be clear. Statements made by persons whose position or liability it is necessary to prove as against any party to the suit. So right now the parties to the suit are A and B. A is saying that B is saying that A had to collect some rent from C for B. So these are the persons who are party to the suit right now. So statements made by persons whose position or liability it is necessary to prove as against the party to the suit are admissions. So statements made by persons whose position or liability it is necessary to prove is C, who has some position or liability that has to be proved as against the parties who are in the suit right now. So if we prove C's statement, his position or liability as against A, then we will be able to establish that yes, there was some rent that A had to collect but he did not, and so B will win the case. So it is important in this case that C's statement is taken, although he is a third party, which is not generally in the general provision in 18. It is not allowed that an admission be made by a third party. It can only be made by the people who are party to the suit, or they are expressly authorized or impliedly authorized agents. But here the third person is also making a statement, and his statement is admissible. Why? Because there is a position or liability that is attached to him, and it is necessary to be proved against the parties that are parties to the suit right now. And there's a condition: if such statements would be relevant as against any person in relation to such position or liability in a suit brought by or against them. If there are if these statements, the statement that C makes, that I owed this rent to B, if this statement would be relevant in a suit brought against or by C, the third party, if he brings a suit, if suppose there was a suit between B and C, and B had said that he owes me rent, so the statement of C that I owe him rent, or I do not owe him rent would be relevant. So this section says if there is a case that is brought against that person who has a position or liability that is necessary to prove against the parties to this suit, if those would be relevant, then their statements can be taken and they will be admissible in the present case also. And also after comma there is, and if they are made whilst the person making them occupies such position or subject to such liability. Now this remains constant in every section that we are reading right now, that the character that they hold should be continuing. It should not have been seized, or else their statement will not have any relevance as an admission. So they should be made while the person making them occupies such position. Such position kaun si? The position that we are talking about in the first line. Statements by a person whose position or is subject to such liability, the liability that we are talking again about in the first line. Such position or liability necessary to be proved against the party. Now comes section 20. Section 20 says admissions by persons expressly referred to by the party to the suit. Now again we'll go to the illustration for this one. The question is whether a horse sold by A to B is sound. There's a question. The court has to determine whether the horse that was sold by A to B was of sound mind or not, because there might have been some injury that must have been caused by that horse being of unsound mind, and now the parties have come to court that you determine who should be liable for this thing. So the parties ask for the fact and the question in issue is whether the horse sold by A to B is sound, and A says that go and ask C. C knows all about it. Now C's statement will be admissible, although again C is a person who is not allowed to give an admission in the general provision, that is 18, because they are only the agents and the parties to the suit are allowed to make admissions, statements that are admissions. But here the provision says that if a person has been expressly referred to for information by the parties to the suit, then their statements will be admissions. So what will happen is that now C knows, C might be the person who is an expert or who is someone who had sold that horse to B, or he is concerned with the case somehow. But B says that I will not say anything about this. You go to C and ask him whether this horse is of sound mind or not, and whatever he says will be my answer. Even if he does not say that, whatever he says will be my answer or my admission, then also whatever C says, the person who he has referred for the answer to the issue that is in the court, the statement by C will be relevant, and that will be moved against B. So regarding that, we have a few things that are relevant. So firstly, in the case of Sitaram versus Pyari 47, Allahabad 1921, the court has said that if someone says that a party may refer to some other party for answer to a question in the suit, and he refers to another person for the statement of his views, he approves that statement in anticipation and he adopts that statement as his own. He will have to adopt the statement made by the third party that he has referred the party to, the court to, as his own. He will adopt it, and if he adopts it and it goes against him, then it will be used against him or in his favor, because this is the third party who is making the admission. So we'll not be seeing whether it is made against him or for or on his own behalf. We'll just see the statement, and it may go against him or the other party also. Now, the information means information of fact and not decision of any kind. So like we have already talked about, admissions to the fact are admissible, not of law. So if you refer to some person, you will be referring a question of fact, not a question of law. So question of law, if you have referred, will not be admissible. It will not be allowed. Question of fact will be allowed. Now there's another important thing which has been observed in the case of Ramji Lal versus Ram Sahni Lal Pandey, AIR 1978, Allahabad 351, that when you refer a question to such party, his statement does not become a decision. It will not be treated, he will not be treated as an arbitrator. He will be treated just as a party who has been referred a question to. So his statement would merely be a statement according to his knowledge or belief, and the court will then decide and pronounce the judgment on basis of such statement. It will not be a final thing. The court will still apply its mind, and if it thinks fit that such statement should be admissible and should be relied upon, they will rely upon it and will give a judgment. But if the court thinks that it should not be relied upon, then they will not rely upon it. It's not necessary. He's not an arbitrator who will decide it with finality, because he's not taking any evidences, he's not taking any arguments, he's not a person who is competent to do it. He will just be giving a statement, and that statement will come on record, and the court who's handling the case will be deciding whether to rely on it and give a judgment relying on it or not. Now again, there's a very important question: can the party making the reference resile? If you have made a reference, suppose in this case the person says go and ask C, he knows all about it. Now can you resile? Can you say that no, don't go to him, I was just kidding? So no, you cannot do that. You cannot do that. Like previously we have discussed, you cannot do that until and unless you can do that until and unless the other party has acted upon it. So if the party has not acted upon it, if these persons have not moved and recorded this statement in the court, or maybe gone to see for his statement, then if they have not gone, then you can resile, then you can take it back. But if they have proceeded, if the court has proceeded on that thing, afterwards you cannot resile. And after the person has given his opinion as to the matter that you have referred for, then definitely you cannot resile. Section 21 says proof of admissions against persons making them and by or on their behalf. Now the general rule which this section says is that an admission, as we've already discussed, an admission I can only make an admission against myself. I cannot make it on my behalf, because I will always favor myself. I don't want myself to suffer a punishment. So I will always say that I have not murdered this person. I have not illegally trespassed through this piece of land, or I have not occupied this land illegally. So I will always say that. I will never say that yes, I have murdered, or yes, I have trespassed, or yes, punish me. So the general principle is that admissions are relevant and may be proved as against the person who makes them. They can be proved against him, but not for him, in his favor, or his representative in interest. For against him or his representative in interest. So agents are also included here. But they cannot be proved by or on behalf of the person who makes them. So they cannot be proved by or on behalf of the person who makes them, because obviously they will talk for themselves, not against themselves, or by the representative in interest, except in the following cases. There are 3 cases which the Bayer Act talks about, and these 3 cases will be clear when you go through the illustrations. They're very important illustrations and very easily explained. We'll read the provision first and then we'll go to the illustration. An admission may be proved by or on behalf of the person making it when it is of such a nature that if the person making it were dead, it would be relevant as between third persons under section 32. Section 32 talks about dying declarations. So this subsection says, clause 1 says, an admission may be proved by or on behalf of the person making it when it is of such a nature that if the person making it were dead. So जब वो इस नेचर की है कि जो इंसान मर चुका है, अगर उसने वो स्टेटमेंट करी होती, उसने वो स्टेटमेंट दी होती, तो वो रेलेवेंट होती किसी ऐसे सूट में जिसमें वो और एक थर्ड पार्टी होती. अभी तो वो मर चुका है जिसके बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. द पर्सन इज डेड, बट if he were alive, the statement so made would be relevant between him and the other party in any suit that they were involved in. For this we will read illustration B. A. The captain of the ship is tried for casting her away. There's a person who is the captain of the ship. He's steering and directing the ship, and he casts her away from her way. So the evidence is given to show that the ship was taken out of her proper course. Now the people who have sued this person, they say that he took the ship away from the course that it had to follow, which is wrong. So now A produces a book kept by him in the ordinary course of his business, showing observations alleged to have been taken by him from day to day and indicating that the ship was not taken out of the proper course. A may prove these statements because they will be admissible between third parties if he were dead under section 32. Now we will imagine that if B was dead, in case when he casted the ship away and he was dead, and then his book that he is referring to was shown as a statement. Statement can be oral, documentary, or electronic record. Now this one is a documentary. So if this book was produced as a statement for showing that when he died, before he died, he had captured, he had written, he had documented that he is casting the ship away, then it would be relevant between to prove that there was a reason why he casted her away. It was not because he wanted to, because of his own means or something, for his own interest, but he had to be, and he in the ordinary course of doing things, he recorded that transaction in the book kept in which he records all the transactions of the ship. So that will be relevant, because in case B was dead and there was, so now in this illustration it says that now A produces a book kept by him in the ordinary course of business, ordinary course of directing the ship that he is the captain of, showing observations alleged to have been taken by him from day to day and indicating that the ship was not taken out of her proper course. Now he shows that there are certain routes or certain observations that he made of maybe the longitude and latitude that they capture while they're at sea, that this ship was going as per the course that it had to, and it was not taken here and there as is being alleged here. So this book, this statement that he has made, now this statement is relevant because this is a documentary one, and an admission can be oral, documentary, or in electronic form. So this is admissible, this is an admission. So this book, if A was dead, if we suppose that A was dead and someone had said that this person had taken it away, so if someone would have produced this book and said that, see, A used to observe all the latitudes and longitudinal spots of the track that the ship followed, and these tracks are here in this book, and you can see the course that this ship followed. He used to do it every day, from day to day. He observed these observations of the track of the ship. So you will be convinced that yes, like he was observing for all the days, he observed for this day also, and if he were dead, these statements would be relevant, and we would have come to know that this person had steered the ship on this course and not that course, because this course has been observed in the book that is kept with him. So if any statement that is made by a person in his own favor, now here the statements that we have produced in that book are in the favor of A himself, which are not admissible generally, but they will be admissible if they would be relevant, if they would have been relevant if the person was dead. So there is some genuinity in these kinds of statements, that he is making those observations on day-to-day basis. And again here, when someone alleged that he casted that ship away, he showed that book that these are the observations that are being made, and this is being done every day. So there's a genuinity, and that can be used in his own behalf. Now another case where it can be such admissions may be proved by or on behalf of the person making it. An admission may be proved by or on behalf of the person making it when it consists of a statement of existence of any state of mind or body relevant or an issue made at or about the time when such state of mind or body existed, and is accompanied by the conduct rendering its falsehood improbable. So here what is happening is that the person who is making the admission for himself or by himself for himself, this person is also showing some other conduct, state of mind or body which is relevant or an issue which was made at or about the time of such state of mind, and it is accompanied by a conduct rendering its falsehood improbable. So we have seen that the conduct, previous and subsequent conduct in section 8 is it is a relevant fact. Now if a person shows that there was some state of mind or there was some conduct that I showed at or about the time when I did this transaction that I am being alleged for, and that conduct shows that the thing that is being alleged for could not have been happened because this was the conduct of that person, or this was the mental condition or bodily state at that time, so you will come to know that the thing that is being alleged is improbable. There is less probability or is no probability of that thing being or that thing happening. So this is in illustration D. A is accused of receiving stolen goods knowing them to be stolen. किसी ने कहा कि A ने ऐसे गुड्स लिए हैं, रिसीव किए हैं जो उसे पता था कि चोरी के हैं. Now A offers to prove that he refused to sell them below their value. So now A is offering that I will prove that that I had refused to sell them below their value. Now A may prove these statements though they are admissions because they are explanatory of the conduct influenced by facts and issue. Now what is happening is that he is saying that I had refused to sell them below their value. This is a conduct that is relevant to this situation because things and these things he knew to be stolen, he would have sold it for any price. So if something is stolen, you could have you can sell it for any price because you have not paid for it. It is stolen, it's free of cost for you. So a conduct, an act in which you refuse to sell it to someone for lesser price. Someone comes to you and says that please sell this jewelry or sell this car or any property to me, and you say no, I will not sell it below this price. I have paid this much for it and I will only sell it for this much. So this conduct shows that that thing was of some value to you. If it was stolen, you could have sold it for any price, be it 20,000-30,000 lesser than the price that you would sell if you had bought that property yourself. So there's much more value of the property that you have purchased yourself than a property that you have received as a stolen property which you have not paid for. So this conduct shows that your conduct was genuine and that you must have that the allegation that is being made against you is false, and this thing that you have is yours only. So you will prove by the statement of maybe some other person or some transaction, some conversation showing that you had refused to sell that property for lesser price. So the section says an admission may be proved by or on behalf of a person making it if it was relevant otherwise than as an admission. Now a statement, what is barred here? Admissions are barred here, that you cannot make an admission by or on in your own favor. So what if you don't make an admission but you give something else as an evidence? So here there's an example that if there's a suit for partition going on, there's person A who says that there's a property that I am entitled to, and there's another party that says that this I am entitled to this property. So under the clause 3 of section 21, one of the parties comes and shows a statement that was made by the other party in a separate suit. In a separate suit, the statement was made by the party in a record that I'm not the owner of this property, and this person is the owner of this property, or anything else that states that he was not the owner of that property. So now this thing would not be an admission. It would be a statement from another litigation that would be admissible in section 11 of the Indian Evidence Act, and so it will come under the exception that is given in section 21 clause 3. So that will allow that person to bring in that statement because it is not an admission. It does not come as an admission but otherwise. So that's all that we had to cover for this lecture, and maybe we can do another on any other thing, any other topic that you would want us to cover. Keep following Lawyers Club India for more such informative videos. You may browse through all the videos and there's a lot of valuable information that you will get. In case you have not subscribed yet, you may please subscribe to the channel if you think that it adds value to you, because that's our motto. Signing off for now. Thank you so much.